Hello again and welcome, listeners, to Shallow Thoughts and Deep Shit. My name is Jefferson Lambert, and I'll be your host for this atrocity as I journey through the mind of a serial misanthrope. You can listen to this podcast for free at Spotify, Apple iTunes, iHeartMusic, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, CastBox, Radio Public, and Spotify for podcasters. If you like what you hear, please rate the show, subscribe, and follow. You can also follow the show on Instagram, X, Facebook, and YouTube, where you can join for extra content, new episode notifications, and more. And don't forget, you can interact with each episode and post a comment or ask a question if you so desire. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started, shall we? The death of Joby Brower. My name is Marty Jacobson, and back in the 1940s, Joby Brower and I were the best of friends. We lived in New Hamburg, a small hamlet town off the Hudson River just outside of Wappingers Falls. The town wasn't very big back then. I should know. I lived here all of my life. The town hasn't changed much at all. The old playground is still there, but with a new ball diamond and a swing set. The church is still over there on Division Street, and I still live in the same house my grandfather built over on Conklin Street. Some things did change a little, though. We now have 2 railroad tracks going through town instead of just one. The lumber mill along the Hudson River is gone too, replaced by White's Marina decades ago. I sure did miss that old lumber yard when they demolished it. Joby and I built some hell of a good forts with all the scrap wood they left just lying around to rot. I miss old Joby, too. He was the best. We used to do everything together when we were kids. We would walk to school together, ride our bikes, sail our paper boats in the murky water of the Hudson. We built our forts and went fishing at the train trestle, or sometimes we would just sit around for hours talking on a beautiful Sunday afternoon when we got home from church. God, those were the good old days. Joby's grave is up on the hill across from what is now a filling station for the local oil company. I still go up there every so often to keep the weeds and shrubs from growing up old Joby's headstone. The frayed writing on it is all but gone from the decades of weather, but I still know what it says. Our beloved son, Joby Brower, born 1928, died 1941. I still remember what happened back in that summer in 1941, too. Yes, I'll remember it until the day that I die. Joby and I were 14 at the time. It was summer vacation, and we had a whole 2 months to ourselves to do what we saw fit. We fished a lot down at the trestle, and sometimes afterward, we would do chores for Mrs. Semple, who back then seemed to be 100 years old. She would pay us each a nickel, even though Joby slacked off, and then we'd have it spent on ice cream cones 10 minutes later at Bill Green's General Store. And 51 years later, and her just a few months short of her 100th birthday, I still go to Mrs. Semple in that same house and chop her firewood and clean her chimney for her free of charge. We kept ourselves busy and just passed the time. It was funny how all year long during school we couldn't wait for summer vacation, but when it finally arrived, we were bored to death by the 3rd week. We didn't care, though. As long as we were out of school, everything was just fine. On a hot Friday afternoon, we were lying on our backs in the New Hamburg Park, just watching the white puffy clouds roll by. Joby laid with his arms locked behind his head and a dark green blade of grass between his teeth. He kept telling me that the cloud he was watching looked like Abraham Lincoln. "You see that big one up there?" he asked, pointing up to the sky. "Yeah, what about it?" "Doesn't that remind you of someone?" "No. Who?" "Why, Abe Lincoln, of course. Who'd you think it was?" "Looks like a big old turd to me," I told him, and he frowned and smacked my arm lightly to show his disgust at my version of his cloud. And then from off Main Street, Donnie and Sonny Bell came waltzing across the grass toward us. Donnie, the younger of the two, had on his yellow Little League cap, and Sonny had his Louisville slugger resting on his shoulder and was throwing an old brown baseball up and down in his other hand. Those Bell brothers were the worst. They were always picking on somebody or other. And when they had no one to pick on, they would be home tormenting their younger sister with promises to tear her limb from limb if she told their mom or dad. They strode over to us and stopped at our feet as Donnie rested his two thumbs inside his denim pockets and Sonny continued throwing the old ball up and down. Donnie spoke first, without even as much as a hello. "Do you sissies want to get a game of baseball going?" "With who? You guys?" I asked sarcastically. "Yeah," Donnie bellowed, leaning in toward me. "With us guys. You got a problem with that, Jacobson?" he asked, taking a step closer. "I'd rather play with my sister's dolls than play ball with you two. Why don't you go find someone to beat up?" Joby asked them, knowing full well that depending on their mood, we could have been in a lot of trouble with them. "I think I just did. You want to fight me right now, Joby Brower, you little chicken neck?" Donnie said, almost foaming at the mouth. He advanced on us, and Joby and I sat up on the grass. Sonny stepped in and held his younger brother back. "Come on, Don. These babies aren't worth the light of day," Sonny said, slinging the bat over his other shoulder. "Let's go find some real players." I knew Sonny must have been preoccupied with something that day because on any given day, he could have easily by himself sent me and Joby home with our teeth in our pockets. "Yeah, go on. Leave us alone," Joby said, staring Donnie down. "Go on. Leave us babies alone," Donnie mocked in a baby's voice. Just then, April Meyer walked over to the swing sets and sat down and started kicking her feet to soar higher and higher. She was with her best friend, Rachel Kunick, but we hardly even noticed her. April sure was a sight for sore eyes. She was the prettiest girl we ever saw. Even the Bell brothers turned to gawk at them before turning away and walking toward the ball field. "Hi, Joby," April and Rachel both said in chorus. "Hi, Marty," they finally said to me. We exchanged hellos, and then Joby and I went back to our cloud watching. I knew April liked Joby. It steamed me that she never paid any real attention to me. Can't say I really blamed her. Nobody likes the fat kid. I can't say I blamed her for liking Joby either. He was every parent's dream come true. He was handsome and witty and excelled at almost everything that he did. He was president of his writing club in school, and he was the star player on the basketball team. He had light golden hair that seemed he never had to comb and dimples that everyone just adored. He didn't have a mean bone in his body, and I was glad he was my best friend. But I never did tell Joby that I was secretly in love with April. I would have done anything to be with her. She meant that much to me. The summer wore on for us over the next few weeks, and we didn't really do much in that time. Sometimes Joby would come over to my house in the mid-morning and ask if he wanted to go with him, April, and Rachel up to our fort in Riverview. I always refused, but they went without me anyway. The times that Joby was hanging out with April, I would just go down to the train trestle and fish by myself, or go over to the lumber yard and sit by the river and watch all the boats go by. I wanted to go with them. I really did. But the jealousy killed me. I loved April, and nothing could ever change that. One day, I was down at the lumber yard sitting behind a freshly tarred stack of railroad ties, crying by myself. I just couldn't hold back my feelings anymore. I really needed someone to talk to besides Joby. He was my best friend, but there were some things I just couldn't talk to him about. At 5 o'clock that night, I was still down there weeping. I cried for so long and so hard that I fell asleep behind a stack of smelly wood. I slept there until the small hours of the morning. When I finally woke up and ran home, my father was waiting for me. He tanned my hide good with his belt that night. Half the town was out looking for me until midnight. I went to bed that morning, with red puffy welts on the back of my thighs, and I never did get a chance to talk to anyone about my problem. Joby was dead 2 weeks later. The police found his body floating face down in the river near Chelsea. They questioned a lot of people who knew Joby, including me. No one knew what had happened. The police determined he must have been fishing all alone down at the train trestle because they found his fishing pole there on the dock next to a soggy carton of worms. His body was bloated and eaten away by the carp and the bass in the river. After they pulled him from the water, his parents had to go identify the body. They have never been the same since. A couple of days later, the whole town gathered up on the top of the hill, what was then the town cemetery. There were only about 15 or 20 other people buried there. Joby Brower was the last person to be buried in New Hamburg. After him, they started burying people in the new Wappingers Rural Cemetery. We all bid Joby goodbye on that hot August day. The people of our town were shocked, stunned, and most of all hurt. Hurt because they couldn't have been there to help him. Some say he was just being careless and fell into the water and was swept away by the strong current. Others say it was just a horrible freak accident. They never knew the truth about Joby Brower. So here I am, 51 years later. I'm 65 now, and still the horror of that summer remains fresh in my mind. I still have nightmares of Joby struggling to get back to shore as the powerful Hudson River current pulled him farther and farther away. Joby cries to me in my sleep. He cries because he knows the truth about his death. And so do I. I killed Joby Brower that summer. I just couldn't stand the way he waltzed around with April. He was always going places with her and doing things that they both enjoyed. I was really torn up inside. I just couldn't let it go on. I took Joby fishing with me that hot August morning in 1941. It was me that pushed him into the murky depths of the Hudson. It was me who just stood there and watched as my best friend fought bravely for his life as the current pulled him away. Once, he even made it back to the dock, and he started climbing back up, yelling at me. I turned his fishing pole around and used the end to push him back into the river, my eyes swelling with tears. I couldn't even touch him, and I used the pole because I didn't want to feel death. I knew I couldn't have turned back. He never made it back to shore. Since that summer, I have never been the same either. I am ashamed and guilt-ridden. Though I am no longer the same fat boy that did that awful deed, I am still plagued with guilt and am haunted by Joby's horrible face sticking out of the water. Until now, no one has ever known the truth about the death of Joby Brower. Not even my wife, April Meyer Jacobson.